Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to Project Green's live broadcast. We're so happy today to have special guests with us to help us in this conversation. We've started these broadcasts back in April, just as this whole pandemic was beginning. And obviously, it goes without saying that this pandemic had direct impact on our global health, but also on our global economy. And it's one thing to hear about global economy and what's happening even nationally, but we like to talk about what's happening, right in our own homes and talk about solutions, things that we should be doing right now to improve our finances. And so we have, um, you know, one of the best in the game here to help us do that today, and that is Lynnette Khalfani-Cox. I am so grateful to have met her, or become acquainted with her many years ago through the D-Free conference, and heard her talking about, how to understand your credit, how to improve your credit, and just have heard her in so many different venues since then. And so she continues to do just what we like to do and help people to improve their financial situation. And so, Lynnette, thanks for being here. I'd love to have you tell us even a little bit more about yourself than I've started to do.
Well, thank you so much, Dallas. And I'm super appreciative to be here with you and to have an opportunity to share with your audience. You're right that these are incredibly challenging times with, the COVID-19 outbreak and the global health crisis that everyone's facing, which has, of course, turned into an economic crisis as well. So part of what we share, as we talked about before, via phone, one of our shared passions is about helping people with their personal finances. So I kind of stumbled into, honestly, becoming a money coach. And as a money coach, really what it means is that I'm a financial educator. So I teach people about personal finances, how to save, how to get out of debt, how to, pay for your kids' college education, plan for a secure retirement, improve your credit, as you referenced, one of my D-Free presentations. But at the core, money impacts so much of our lives in so many ways. And that's one of the big appeals to me about what I do professionally. I do fully understand that money isn't everything, but it's a lot. And it can definitely help you in so many aspects of your life because it really does touch so many areas of our lives. It touches our, not only, of course, our fiscal health, but our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, because a lot of folks get stressed out if the money isn't straight. It can affect your relationships. It can affect your ability to be a generous giver and to donate either financially or from a time standpoint to causes or issues or organizations that you care about. So for me, I consider this my life's professional mission. I call it spreading the gospel of personal finance, if you will. And like I said, I kind of stumbled into it. I was not a person who knew about, stock market and investing or managing money. I did not grow up in a wealthy household at all. In fact, I had a very poor upbringing. If I'm candid, my dad was a shoe shine man from Harlem, and my mom was a secretary and a cashier. They moved from New York to Southern California, to the Los Angeles area, which is where I was raised, and went to undergraduate, graduate school out there before I started my career initially as a journalist. So I was a reporter for several years, first just as a general assignment reporter, and then I kind of stumbled into financial news reporting. I started working for Dow Jones and Company. And so at the time, Dow Jones was the parent company of the Wall Street Journal. And so I had a number of roles. I was a reporter, a special writer. I became a bureau chief. I was a deputy managing editor. I was a Wall Street Journal reporter in the end for CNBC. So in the context of all of that, I learned a lot about personal finances and about just various aspects of money management in general. I used to cover Wall Street. I used to write about the brokerage industry and investing. So when I ultimately left my CNBC role, and again, I was a Wall Street Journal reporter, I had been doing the print side of things under the Dow Jones umbrella, but then I was on air as a CNBC correspondent. So when I left that job, my very first book that I wrote was a book called Investing Success. And so it was talking to people about mistakes that people had made in the financial markets and how to avoid or fix those mistakes. And then that sort of mushroomed. And, here we are X years later, I've written, 15 books, all of which, again, have to do with personal finances and money management. I'm just as passionate about finances now as I was back then. And, the life has kind of folded together to the extent that I left CNBC a long time ago in 2003. And I now own, and since 2003, have owned a financial education business. Our company is called themoneycoach.net. That's our LLC. And I co-own it with my wonderful husband, Earl Cox. And so we're partners and partners in love and in marriage and in really everything that we do. And we have a great 50-50 kind of arrangement that just works for us. So all of the things that I'm kind of weak in, if I'm honest, and that I either lack in terms of skill set or abilities, he's very, very strong and good. Thank the Lord. So the partnership, like I said, it really works. And we both love being able to bring a message, ultimately a message of hope and inspiration to people financially, not just from the practical and tactical, telling people here's what to do, but also now in the way that we live our lives and the way that we share with folks to, hopefully set a good example about being good stewards and showing what we're doing even to build generational wealth. And then, of course, to give people, good, solid insights and tips into what they can do to live a better life financially as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. You said so many things that just stuck with me. You said, our finances affect, every area of our lives, so many areas of our lives. And, Jesus said that where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And so, we that's something that I believe and teach as well, that as we help people to set their finances free, they're setting their hearts free to do what, God has called and placed them here to do. And so, and thank you again for sharing your story. Our vision statement with Project Green is turning everyday people into money heroes. And so, just as I listened to your story, I was just tracking from how you said you had humble beginnings, so from being everyday people into now, I would call you a money hero. You have achieved many of your own money goals and you're helping other people to do that as well. And so that's what we are striving to do. And I say we because Project Green is not just me, it's our staff, it's our board, it's our grassroots financial advocates, it's the people whose lives we touch through our workshops and more. And many of those people that I just mentioned are in this meeting with us today, and they will be interacting with us using chat in a few minutes. Also, they'll be talking verbally. So let's jump into it for the time that we have today. Again, as we are going through the many different phases of this pandemic, and who knows how many phases there will be, but a couple of months ago, we did get some relief. There was a check that many of us received, and now a lot of people have been checking their mailboxes daily, just wondering if there's another check coming. So Lynnette, would love to hear. I know you pay close attention to what's happening at the federal level and with the relief bills. So we'd love to know your perspective on what we might or might not expect in the way of another relief package.
So there's good news and bad news on that front. The good news is that we definitely are going to get some additional relief. And members of Congress, they got to get together and agree on the terms, the kind of nuts and bolts and the dollar figures around yet another stimulus bill. The bad news, sorry to say, the bad news is that it's not going to be a particularly speedy process. Frankly, we're already kind of past a couple of deadlines that even the folks on the Hill themselves set for themselves. And we know that certain aspects of financial relief have already run out for people. So let's kind of take it back into to better clarify, explain very briefly what the past relief was and then how that ties into the future. So most people remember that, in late March, there was the $2.2 trillion CARES Act that was passed. And as a result of that, there was a whole bunch of different measures to give folks financial relief. So yes, you probably got a $1,200 stimulus check, so-called economic impact check from the Treasury Department if you earned $75,000 or less as an individual, or for couples who made $150,000 or less, if they filed a joint tax return, they got a $2,400 check. Folks who had a kid got $500 on top of that, a child that was under the age of 18. Well, that stimulus money has, been gone. Most people have spent that up already. So, the CARES Act was the sort of mega legislation. But really, even before that, Dallas, there were two other stimulus bills, smaller ones, but they gave relief in a variety of ways. Money for increased testing, some relief and aid for folks who are workers who got sick and needed to take time off from job, for example. And so one of those measures was called the Families First Coronavirus Act, something to that effect. But it gave people payments if you got sick, if you were diagnosed with coronavirus, tested positive, got the disease that it causes, COVID-19, if you had to stay home from work, they had family leave benefits worked into there. If you had to stay home because you were a caretaker, taking care of somebody who got sick, or if you had a child age 14 or under whose school was closed, or a kid who was in daycare, for example, and their daycare provider closed down. So it provided some financial relief on that side as well. So in the aggregate, we really have had thus far 3 different stimulus bills, but the CARES Act was the biggie. It was $2.2 trillion. And again, it was a whole bunch wrapped into that besides just the stimulus bill that I referenced, the $1,200 in economic impact payments. There was money given for food stamps. So there was emergency aid on that front. There was a huge amount of money, over $650 billion, provided for small business owners through the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. There was other grants and loans given out through EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program via the SBA. So there were some other, facets of that stimulus package. Okay, so now fast forward, and the Democrats have already passed legislation on their part in the House. What happened was they put forth essentially a $3 trillion economic stimulus bill. They call it HEROES. Many months went by, and then the GOP and the Senate, they put forth their own much smaller economic stimulus bill. They call it HEALS, HEALS. And their bill was essentially about $1 trillion worth of economic relief. And it had different, differences between the two. One of the chief differences was unemployment. And I know you want to talk a little bit about that, but because the CARES Act had unemployment benefits as well. So bottom line, right now where we are is that there's a little break, lawmakers on the Hill, really they're supposed to kind of resume in September, but some of them have been called back early. They have to do some reconciling of these two bills. They have to reconcile and sort of meet in the middle to say how much aid are we going to provide in terms of yet another stimulus bill, yet another check, an economic impact check to send out. How much are we going to provide in terms of unemployment and some other benefits that are proposed, sometimes on one side and sometimes on the other, and the numbers are different, or in some cases, some forms of relief are only on one side. Like the Democrats, for example, want to provide a massive amount of housing relief to make sure folks don't get evicted. GOP hasn't even addressed that at all. So the bad news, as I said, is that it's going to be a little while because they have to kind of have a meeting of the minds to work out a deal that both sides can finally agree and sign off on.
Okay, all right, thank you. So the good news, help is coming. Bad news, we don't know when. We have to be patient. So in the meantime, as we've been having these conversations, we've been talking about different things that people should do in order to, maximize their financial resources in the midst of this pandemic. So, we've talked about, how to best access medical insurance. We've talked about, making sure that people are doing a great detailed assessment of their budget, looking at your subscriptions that you may have that you're not using because the places may be closed down, all of those sorts of things. Would love to hear, what your thoughts are, Lynnette, about, what is it that people should be doing now to protect and to prosper their financial assets?
So I think on the one level, like everybody sort of individually has to look and say, like, which category do I fall into? Where am I amid this pandemic? Honestly, we're a good 6-7 months into this, right? Coronavirus first kind of reared its ugly head here in January. And then I think everybody got really serious about it, of course, in March, when all the shutdowns started happening. We were like, oh, this is for real. So now, again, fast forward, we're just about to September, and the economic impact continues to be felt literally weekly. Every week we see, pretty much another 1 million people or so filing for unemployment benefits. So it's possible that some people are just still struggling because they got laid off very early in the process, April, or maybe even late March, April, or May, right? So those folks who are struggling with unemployment, with irregular, very irregular income, or feeling like I'm so cash strapped, I'm not even just living paycheck to paycheck anymore, I'm trying to survive. Like I have to just try to keep my head above water. That's one sort of category or classification. Then I think there's a second classification of folks who are like, whew, thank God I didn't lose my job. I'm okay. But yeah, things have gotten a lot tighter because business is slow, or my hours did get reduced. I still do have a job, but maybe my paycheck got cut, or maybe my hours got reduced, or I had to spend on so many other things that I didn't anticipate spending on. I had to help a family member out who lost their job or whatever. So they're kind of like, ooh, I'm treading water, and I'm kind of, I'm okay. I'm still okay. I'm not like dire, but I need to kind of stabilize and make sure everything just doesn't get any worse. And then there's probably a third category of folks who are kind of like, wow, this is a big, economic shock. This is a big healthcare crisis. Thank the Lord, I have not been negatively impacted. You know what? As a matter of fact, I've actually seen my business started to thrive, or my employer let me work from home, and I'm actually saving money because now I don't have to commute and pay for gas, or my insurance company sent me a refund check because the car has been, staying in the driveway or whatever. Or those folks are like, I had a lot of savings. I was already, kind of conservative fiscally, and I was prepared for an emergency, and yeah, here we go. This is an emergency. So I'm actually I'm doing pretty good. Either I'm quite well, or my situation has even somehow improved. I was eligible for federal benefits, and I took advantage of that. I was able to get a business loan. I expanded. Whatever the case is, they're not hurting in any way. In fact, they are probably looking to be opportunistic. And I say that in a good way. I don't mean like in a negative way, opportunistic. I mean, they're looking to leverage whatever it is that they have. their assets, their time, their skill set, their good credit, their relationships, et cetera, whatever they can do, right? So I know that was kind of a long-winded way of saying you got to look at where you are and say, am I struggling to survive? Am I just, kind of staying afloat and stabilizing things? Or am I looking to capitalize on this moment and expand and magnify or improve my finances in some way? The reason I say you got to think about which sort of category you fit into is because, frankly, the strategies are going to be different based on where you are. Because there's really no kind of one size fits all approach to everybody, because again, folks are in kind of different buckets, if you will. Certainly, if you're in that struggling category, I'm going to first tell you to take advantage of every federal resource, every state resource, every opportunity to tap into where you are right now that might exist. So for example, I mentioned that the CARES Act provides food stamps, right? Via the SNAP program. And normally under, normal times, average person, middle class, working folks probably would be like, well, I'm not gonna qualify for food stamps. And yeah, you're right. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't qualify for food stamps. But just turn on the TV every single day and you can see, the lines just, a mile long at food banks, right? Because a whole bunch of families, a whole bunch of individuals, a whole bunch of couples who would have never had to go to a food bank, for example, they are now having to do that amid this pandemic. So a benefit like food stamps, which is sort of a hybrid benefit, just like unemployment, a benefit like that, which is a federal program administered via states, is something that you should definitely look into and not, kind of put to the side or say, oh, that's not for me, etc. Any kind of benefit, whether it's federal, unemployment that, again, you'd have to go through your state to get, I would definitely say to take advantage of those. And you also have to have a shift. So I'm telling folks right now, there's a regular budget, and you kind of alluded to this, Dallas, but there's a pandemic budget, right? So the pandemic budget is one that you establish or recreate based only on the bare essentials. So you reference things like looking at subscriptions and seeing, kind of the excess in your budget or the discretionary items, certainly luxury things, that all has to go out the window when you're just trying to survive, right? So your pandemic budget is also a mindset, right? It's one of those things where you're going to say, what can I actually do differently now that I didn't do pre-COVID? I'm not in that first category of folks who are, struggling, trying to stay afloat, et cetera, but I'm definitely adopting a pandemic mindset. Quick example. My last speaking gig was the very beginning of March, like literally that week when everything got shut down. And I had, got my hair done and whatnot. Well, I'm on lockdown here. I'm in the greater Houston area and I don't go out, okay? I don't go to the hairdresser. I don't do anything. I'm strictly social distancing and I'm practicing, the safest habits that I can to make sure that I don't get sick. So I got to a point about, maybe 2 months ago and I was like, oh my God, I cannot take these grays in my hair anymore. And my husband was like, well, just dye it yourself. And I was like, no, because I go to the hairdresser. I literally have never dyed my own hair. And so he was like, I could just buy you something. Just get online and see what product you want. And so, and I was like, okay. What was that?
Did he offer to do it himself? Was he going to help you?
He didn't offer to do it, but Alexis, my 14-year-old, she offered to help me and she did. So long story short, I get online, I show him, okay, I'll take this little box. And I just, I just looked at what's going to work on Black women's hair and, and what's a good rated product. So I was like, he said, okay, I'm gonna get you a couple of boxes. And I was like, okay, fine. So he gets the thing, it comes to my house, Alexis and I do it. And honestly, it's just like washing your hair. You just put it in there. It's not really hard. Okay. 1, 2, 3 steps. I do it. I'm like, this is perfect. I was like, because y'all, you don't even want to know all these grades. Okay. I had so many grades. I was like, I can't even take to look at myself. I was putting mascara on there. I was doing all kind of crazy stuff. So long story short, it worked. And I was like, oh, that was so good. And I was like, Earl, show me again. I didn't even look at the price. Honestly, I just was saying, here, let me get this. He said, oh, it was like, he said, I think it was like $6, maybe $8. And I was like, what? I literally would spend like $100 at the salon to get my hair dyed and colored and everything. And I was like, oh, never again. I cannot go back. I will one day go back to the hair salon, but I'm not going to be getting my hair dyed and colored there. I'm going to do that part myself. So again, I'm just trying to give an example to say, when you're changing your budget and your spending and all of that, you really should also be shifting your mindset, because this COVID crisis has taught us all a lesson about some of the things that we can do without. My nails. So here's my nails right now. Again, I have not gone to the nail salon, obviously, in like 6 months as well. What did my husband do? He was like, oh, I'll buy you we can order some gel polish online. I'll get you one of those things. He got a little thing that, I don't know what it's called, buzzing and doing that thing. And I did it one day myself. I was like, this is good. Now, it wasn't painted as good as obviously as what they do in the nail salon, but my nails did look good. And right now there's nothing on my nails. They're just nice and clean, but manicured with nothing on there. So what I'm saying is that, some of this is about shifting like the possibilities about what you can do for yourself to save money, and also what you need. Because before I would have been like, well, look, I'm on camera all the time. I'm doing public events and speaking engagements, even via Zoom. I have to still look, I can't be looking crazy. But I was like, oh, I can do it myself. And I actually can save a lot of money. So that's just my own personal examples. But again, folks in that situation, you got to get creative. You got to think about, okay, what am I going to cut back on? What am I going to shift in terms of my mindset and my spending, and the stuff that I thought was absolutely a necessity? Like, no, maybe I can find some way to get rid of some things there. Folks in the middle who are just like trying to stay afloat, you need to be picking it up. I think you need to really amp it up in terms of generating additional income. Most of us are working from, or many of us, I can't say most of us, because obviously we have a lot of folks who are essential workers. We have people who are just in their line of work. They do have to interact and deal with the public, et cetera. But certainly, if you have the capacity from a time, energy, or a willingness standpoint, if this crisis didn't teach us anything, it's that everybody needs an extra big safety net, an extra large nest egg set aside to deal with the what if scenarios, to deal with the emergencies. Because yes, you might not have lost your job, had a pay cut or whatever, but you might be like, ooh, this feels, I don't know, that round of cuts did come to my company or to my department. And maybe I was unscathed, or I was kind of, not in that, I didn't get the axe, but I still don't feel so secure about all this. And who knows what could happen in the future? Who knows how long this pandemic could last? So you need to be thinking long-term in terms of boosting the income side of things, and to generating multiple streams of income, and to being creative in the ways in which you not only say, hey, how can I make an extra buck, but also creative in the way that you manage the existing resources that you do have. And so there's a variety of ways that folks can go about that. Again, of course, because a lot of people are at home, anything that you can do online without having to go outside and to expose yourself from a health and risk standpoint, that's going to be advantageous to you. But part of like getting an extra side hustle, a side gig, extra work going is just literally talking and telling people. Like, you got to hang out your shingle. You got to let folks know, like, oh yeah, I know how to write resumes, or I know how to build websites, or I know how to do editing services, or I know how to perform tech work and IT services, or I know how to be a virtual assistant, or whatever it is that you have the skill set and the capacity to do. Put that out there in the universe and let your network know, you know what, I'm looking for extra work in this industry or in this line of business. And, again, don't be too proud, they say the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so you really do have to kind of speak up and kind of pipe up for yourself. Then on the last end, again, the folks who are being opportunistic, and I'm certainly in that category, I'm looking for opportunities to invest more, opportunities to double down on real estate, opportunities to expand and grow my business, opportunities to, amid this pivot, we were already, Earl and I already both worked from home. We already had an online business in addition to the in-person stuff that I did. So the initial shock was like, oh yeah, all your speaking gigs getting canceled. But outside of that, we've been able to adjust and to pivot with our clients and to move forward. So this year, we have purchased 3 additional investment properties. We're closing on another one next week. So we own 8, we have 8 investment properties, no, 7, I'm sorry, investment properties and our house here. So from a real estate standpoint, we're being very aggressive. We're investing more in our own retirement funds. We max out on our retirement funds annually to make sure that we get the tax benefits of doing that. And of course, to secure our own long-term security and financial security down the road whenever we retire. So, you know, there's ways in which people should be thinking about whether it's the stock market and investing. I was sort of, I kept saying to him, oh, I kept talking about a couple of stocks that I was interested in. And he was like, I told you just go in and buy them. I said, just go in and get it, you know. And for the most part, I typically tell people to look at mutual funds, especially if you're entry level in the stock market, to look at mutual funds, especially index mutual funds, as a low cost entry point and as a way to invest professional money management, diversification, a broad sort of mix of investments in that sort of shopping cart, that basket, if you will, of securities. But beyond that, on the mutual fund side, I was looking at some individual stocks and I was like, oh, I'm kicking myself. I should have bought. And he keeps looking at me like each week, like, why you didn't just do it? And I was like, I'm waiting because I want to make sure what we're doing on this real estate, if we do one more this year, you know? So, you know, there you have it in a nutshell. It's kind of like, where are you? And like, okay, what would be the techniques and the, you know, tactics that are most suitable, again, given your own reality. And then people have to take a good hard look in the mirror and say, you know, in all candor, here's where I am.
Right. That's awesome. I'm sure that some folks have some reaction to your pandemic budget and your personal examples of how you've saved on hair and nails and all those things. But as you kept going, you even got into investments, which is one of the things that we wanted to talk about. Since you've already talked about some of the traditional investments, there's this new fad that we've been hearing a lot of talk about here locally. I'm sure you've been hearing about it as well. They're called susus, and I would love to hear, you know, what is your take on it? Even, you know, our Attorney General here in Michigan, Ms. Jerlene, one of our GFAs, was just even sharing with me that our Attorney General recently released a statement just warning people about illegal pyramid schemes. And I'm sure some of these, some legitimate susus are being, you know, they're actually pyramid schemes in disguise. And so again, this pandemic is just, you know, fertile ground for scams and for people to be taken advantage of. So just wanted to talk about this one specific, this legitimate tool that sometimes may be used illegitimately. Just would love to hear what your take is on susus, Lynnette.
So you threw in a couple of phrases or words and kind of terminology that I think is important for people to know. So just let me very quickly define some here. So first you said, some of these are like a pyramid scheme, right? So again, for folks who don't know, if you picture a pyramid kind of like this, the little triangle, you get a lot of people in at that bottom rung, right? At that bottom level, a lot of quote unquote investors, they give a lot of money. And then it kind of keeps filtering up. Some people go out and drop out, but at the end, there's one person kind of who's profiting and everybody else has kind of lost their money. So the idea of a pyramid scheme is part of what, Bernie Madoff did when he scammed, countless investors, including his own family, members of his synagogue and so forth. And of course, a pyramid scheme is illegal because at the end of the day, you have new money coming in to pay off the old investors, but somebody's going to be left holding the bag. that they didn't get paid, right? That they didn't get the money out of it in terms of a return that they were expecting. So yes, that's totally illegal. So susus, from what I understand and what I believe, and I could be wrong. I didn't go back and look up the history of this, but but I'm a Gen Xer, and I've heard for decades about susus. And my understanding is that in various formats, they've been around in various cultures. Certainly, Caribbean culture is very common, even in Asian culture as well, where essentially kind of like close networks, kinfolks, people who are either related to each other or very close friends would kind of pool their money, their assets, their resources for a given goal. So some susus had like, okay, here, you put in $500. It could be like a Christmas susu, for example. And it's kind of a way to save up January through, the beginning of December, and everybody puts in a certain amount of money. And then at the end, you get money out for a stated goal. Oh, I have my holiday shopping money. That's a sort of miniature kind of version. But certainly, again, in some cultural contexts, some people put into susus, again, with trusted individuals that they know to reach a certain goal. In the Latino community, for example, it'll be a common, they might not call it susu, but the same concept applies. Okay, let's put in money together, X number of family members, and then this first person is going to buy a house. Okay, now this person is ready, has the money for a down payment or even to pay cash and buy the house. Okay, everybody keeps contributing. Now the next person goes and buys the house. So the problem, of course, happens is when you have strangers, flat out scammers who are, their intention right off the bat is to defraud people of their money. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that. So I would be very cautious. I personally would never invest in a susu. I can't even say that I would do it with family members. Some family members, maybe a couple, but I don't know. Nobody's asked me, and they probably know. Don't ask Lynnette because she ain't gonna do it. But if it was trusted, family members within my network or something like that, we wouldn't call it a susu. We would have a written agreement, but the concept I understand as a fundamental one that's actually worked in different communities and different families, et cetera. Again, it's just when it gets polluted, when it gets, corrupted by folks with bad intentions, or when people don't stick to the agreement. And that's just real, that even in some families, even if it's well-intentioned, or people, or a certain network of friends or people who might go in on something together, something happens and then somebody doesn't, kind of fulfill their end of the bargain. And now maybe one person got to take their money out, but the next person who was expecting more contributions and whatnot, they didn't get what they had anticipated. So I'm not at all surprised that the Attorney General there is like, watch out, beware. Because when you start thinking about us living in an age of the internet and how quickly online fraud can and does expand, you can have hundreds and thousands of potential investors, right, in a given susu or in a so-called investment that really is nothing more than a Ponzi scheme, nothing more than a pyramid scheme that is, again, designed to take people's money.
Yeah, exactly. And, with all of the, electronic currency and transactions that we now have available to us, it opens the door up even wider to all of these, scams and schemes. And one thing I'll add too, just about how these susus work, is historically these cultures that you mentioned, they do these circles within a closed circle, whereas these pyramid schemes are constantly bringing new people in. And so, that closed circle element, just really what that does, it makes the susu this sort of forced savings club versus, and everybody gets the same amount. It's just, and you're just doing it incrementally. So
a la the Christmas type of
right, exactly. Yeah. So that's just something I want to throw out there for anybody who may hear this. That's an important thing, I think, to look for. Is this a closed circle where we're just sharing money and people just, whoever gets it first, obviously they maybe get their money, they're able to take advantage of it before I will, but eventually I'm going to get that same amount. So just something I want to share. I'm actually going to wrap up my portion here. We've got some folks who joined us in the meeting, and I know that they were intrigued by what you had to share, and I'd love to hear what questions and comments that they have. And then Lynnette will ask you to tell people how they can learn more about you and your business. And then we'll wrap up our time today. So anyone who's on the call would love to hear your questions or comments. You can use the chat if you'd like. And so we've talked about additional relief that is to come. We've talked about what people should be doing now to protect and prosper their financial assets. And then we talked about SUSUs. So any comments or questions? Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any. So appreciate, again, your being here. Lynnette, maybe you can just tell us about that book that's behind you real quick, the Zero Debt. What's that about? It seems like that's a myth. Can you really live life with zero debt?
Exactly. You know, I've been asked that a lot of times. So back in 2001, I had $100,000 in credit card debt alone. So I know what it's like to be in debt, okay? And I'm not talking about my mortgage. I didn't have a mortgage back then. Oh, actually, I guess I did have a mortgage. But I'm talking about just credit card debt, not my student loans that I had when I got out of grad school. I had 40,000 in student loans. So I looked at it one day and said, oh my God, this is redonkulous. Let me get rid of this debt. So I took 3 years, I paid it all off. And then in 2004, I wrote this book called Zero Debt, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. And I explained what I did to get out of debt, to get out of $100,000 in credit card debt without missing any payments whatsoever. And yes, I paid off all my debts. I didn't file for bankruptcy or anything like that. I paid off everything that I owed and then some. And I explained in a 30-day action plan for others how they too could get out of debt. And so I didn't promise people, of course, that you're going to be out of debt in 30 days. I just gave them the roadmap to jumpstart it and to say, I know it's overwhelming. I know you feel stressed out about this. So here's what I want you to do. Day 1, do this and just take one step. Day 2, do this. Day 3. So I walked them through 30 days worth of action steps, things to do to jumpstart their debt elimination methods. And guess what happened? Zero Debt became a New York Times bestseller, Business Week bestseller, Essence magazine bestseller. It did really well. We did in 2010, we did the second edition of Zero Debt. And then last year, I think 2019, we did the third and most recent edition of Zero Debt, which is the book that you're seeing right now. So unfortunately, what also happened over the past 15 plus years is that the debt problem in America only got worse. So we have about $1 trillion in consumer debt and just in credit card debt outstanding right now. You know, not to mention 1.6 trillion in student loan debt. We have about 1.5 trillion in auto loans, another 7+ trillion, 7 to 9 trillion if you really want to count mortgage debt and looking at home equity loans, home equity lines of credit thrown in there as well. So overall, we've become a nation of debtors. It's just like a massive, crazy amount of debt. And to answer your question, is it possible? Yes, it's absolutely possible to become debt-free. Zero Debt in particular focuses on getting out of credit card debt. I told you I have 15 books. So one of them, a sequel to Zero Debt, is called Zero Debt for College Grads, From Student Loans to Financial Freedom. And that one is about getting rid of your student loans, obviously. And so, again, because that was a beast that I had to also tackle. But yes, it's possible. You have to, again, just know the right steps and strategies to take. And I outline them, and I shared with people in that book too, my own personal story, how I got into debt, bottom line, crazy spending, and how I got out of debt through a whole sort of multitude of strategies.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So we do have a couple of questions here in the chat. I'll ask these and then we'll wrap our time up. So one is, are there any recommended investment sites for buying individual stocks?
Well, so one of the things that I'm cautious about, because again, I tell people that I'm a financial educator. And so I typically don't like to make individual recommendations. And I think I kind of alluded to this a little bit when I say I tell people to stick to mutual funds and whatnot. And even in my own life, that's what I would do. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should buy these individual stocks. I don't want to make a recommendation. Certainly, I will tell you this though. I guess I can tell you some some apps and whatnot that you could look at. I can tell you some stuff that I use. I have to be cautious. Again, I tell people I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not I don't have a Series 7 or 63 or 65. I don't sell securities. So, obviously I don't get any commissions from any of this stuff. You can buy individual stocks in fractional shares. You can buy in whole shares through different apps, whether that's things like Acorns, Robinhood, and others, right? That will let you buy individual shares. Acorns is sort of a roundup app, and you're saving money based on your purchases, and they're rounding up the amount that goes up to the next dollar amount. And there's also a feature in there that you can invest, and you can have a multiplier. You can say, I'm going to invest 3 times what I have accrued or amassed through my roundups, etc. My husband and I use Acorns and I don't have any affiliation with them. There's not a promotion for them or anything like that. But I'm really shocked every year how many thousands we save just from our normal everyday spending, having some cards tied to it, and they do the roundup features. So that's kind of like an easy no-brainer way. Again, I referenced apps like Robinhood as well that you can use to buy shares. And there's others. Literally, if you just Google, there's a ton of sites also that will help you to do reviews. Because at the end of the day, part of the reason why I don't give people individual recommendations, I don't want them to come back and say, you told me to use this one, and but I do like to give people a framework for making good decisions and to tell them, go do your homework, because you really do have to educate yourself. And if you literally do a Google search of something as basic as reviews of investing, sites that sell individual shares or something like that. My personal advice, generally speaking, is that I usually don't like the average person to buy individual stocks. And so let me just very quickly say the reason why. I think mutual funds are a much, much better option for the average person, because, we have a universe of over 30,000 stocks. I don't even know where the number is right now, but it's in the tens of thousands. Again, even ditto for many thousands of mutual funds you could buy. But mutual funds, by their very definition, the way that the product works is that it's a basket of securities. So you're getting diversification, which is crucial to your investing outcome. 90% of your portfolio's performance is based on the asset allocation or the mix of securities that you own. So it's really a little bit of a wrong orientation or mindset to just think, okay, I'm gonna buy some Tesla, or I'm gonna buy Amazon or Netflix, 3 stocks that I'm interested in. I won't deny that, but as a whole, it's risky if you're gonna say, oh, I'm gonna throw $5,000 at X stock, and if X stock performs poorly, you could lose. Well, in theory, you could lose all your money. It could go to zero. Not very likely, but companies do go bankrupt. Stuff happens. So mutual funds are much safer, and you have a professional money manager who's kind of looking after it. Again, if you favor index funds, you'll have a lower cost structure to those as opposed to actively managed funds. And so I like the concept mainly of people sticking with mutual funds. So there you go.
One other question, and then we'll wrap up our time. So increasing investments in retirement funds seems like a permanent It seems so permanent during this unprecedented time. So are there other investments that can be made uh, that might be more short-term, but maybe still just as lucrative?
Well, let me share some information because it's actually not true that increasing investments in your retirement fund during this time can be, it's so permanent and kind of locked in. Actually, the opposite is true right now. Um, During the pandemic in 2020 with regard to your retirement funds. And that's because part of the CARES Act, that $2.2 trillion legislation that I mentioned, they worked in a provision to allow much greater flexibility for you to access your retirement funds and to take money out. If you have an IRA, if you have a 401k, a 403b, et cetera, any kind of qualified retirement plan like that, they're actually letting you take out up to $100,000 to do so without penalty. Typically, if you're not 59 and a half yet, you have to pay a 10% penalty. They're like, nope, you can take that money out. You can do that. And even the $100,000 number is a big difference because it used to be capped at $50,000. So they doubled the amount that you can take out. They made it tax-free from a penalty standpoint, and they also made it tax-free from the standpoint of you being able to recontribute the money over a 3-year period. So a lot of people don't know this, but part of the CARES Act was that, yes, you can take money out of your retirement account and you can just say, you know what, I took out $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. I'm not telling you to do this. I'm just telling you what is legal and accessible and available for you to do during the pandemic and during this 2020 year in particular. So you could take X dollars out, let's say $30,000, and you could recontribute it over 3 years. You have 3 years to put it back in. And if you do so, then you're not taxed on that money either. Normally, again, if you take the money out, you'd have to pay ordinary income taxes on it. That's just, normal things. But now they're letting you do that and not have to pay the ordinary income taxes on it if you recontribute it over a 3-year period. So I just wanted to challenge that assumption because, again, these are some finer details, and I'm a little money geek. I happen to read the 800 plus page CARES Act, and I know that you actually can. You have some flexibility now during the pandemic. Additionally, part of what the Democrats have proposed, they're looking at other things to extend unemployment, beyond the extra $600 a week boost in federal pay that ran out July 31st. In general, they want to expand unemployment through 2021, through either January or March of 2021, give some additional benefits around housing and some other things, again, that would give people some financial relief so that, if you did tap into money or if you did, you probably have a little better cash flow in the future, given all of the potential for other stimulus. But okay, so let me just say as a whole, if you're looking at investments outside of longer term investments, yes, there's definitely things that you can do. I've already shared that I favor funds over individual stocks. But if you're looking at any kind of mutual funds, you need to understand that you can buy, it doesn't have to be stocks, for example. You can buy bonds or bond funds. Bonds aren't performing particularly well right now, but as a whole, if you're interested in equities, if you're interested in stocks and ownership of a company, actually it is a good time to buy right now. We've seen, in March and April, there was like a huge sell-off in the stock market, but then the market has come roaring back. The market is up. The economy is kind of faltering and struggling, and we're trying to deal with reopenings and, getting COVID under control. But the stock market is actually on fire. So you can buy individual securities, you can buy mutual funds, you can buy in taxable accounts or things that are not sort of tax preferred, as would be a retirement account. And frankly, you can, set aside money and do well in those. I would just say 2 or 3 parameters. Think about your risk tolerance, think about your time horizon, and think about your overall asset allocation. Again, I explained before that your mix of investments is really what determines the performance of it overall. but also your time horizon matters, because if you're like, I need this money in 3 months or 3 years, that's going to be a different type of investment that you would buy, probably something a little more liquid, and something a little safer. You're not going to just put your money in the stock market if it's like, oh, I need it in 3 months from now. But if you're like, okay, I have a 10-year-old, and when he goes off to college in 8 years, yeah, you might think about, should I put money in a 529 savings account, for example, and let the money grow, generate interest, etc. And then 8 years from now, when my son is ready to go off to college, voila, we'll have more money available for college. And again, letting it sit in there, you see how quickly things can grow. If you just remember the kind of the rule of 72. So the rule of 72 relates to a stated interest rate that you might get on a given investment and the time. So if you put, $5,000 in an account and it got a 7% return, very eminently doable over a 10-year period in the stock market, because we know on average stocks have returned annually about 10%. But if you got a 7% return on your money, in 10 years, that money would double. So your $5,000 would become $10,000 in 10 years if you got a 7% return. If you got a 10% return on that $5,000, that means in 7 years, your money would double. So you can kind of do some rough math and think about it like, if I did invest right now, if I invested, say, $10,000, and I did get 10% return, in 7 more years, my $10,000 is going to be $20,000. Again, nobody has a crystal ball. I'm not giving you guarantees, but I'm just talking to you about historical averages. So yeah, if you're looking at interim, investments or things that you could be able to tap into, it's not long-term. It's not, 20 or 30 years away from retirement. It depends on what your goals are as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All these comments, I hope you're seeing some of them in the chat. People saying thank you for the great detailed presentation, great information. And you talked about a lot of things. Where can people go to learn more about some of these topics and specifically to hear from you on them?
Sure. So I told you my husband and I have a business called themoneycoach.net. That's our LLC. And, that's where organizations really go to hire me for speaking engagements and for consulting and things of that nature, financial literacy initiatives. But for consumers, I really like to point people to our free financial advice site, and it's askthemoneycoach.com, askthemoneycoach.com. And on there, you'll find 1,600 plus articles on pretty much every, category of topic under the umbrella of money management. And we have a special COVID section right now on there where I have a ton of content, articles, videos, etc., where I talk about all of the things that you can do and get right now during this COVID outbreak, whether that's your stimulus checks, whether that's unemployment, whether that's food stamps and SNAP benefits, whether that's things like sick pay, family medical leave pay, and those benefits that are available to you. There's thousands of dollars in benefits that are available on that front. Most people don't know that. So you'll find a lot of content around there. And then lastly, moneycoachuniversity.com, Money Coach University, that is our video-based platform where I offer digital coaching, some free courses on there as well, and a way for people to just kind of, learn from me on an ongoing basis. I have, home ownership courses, debt courses, credit courses, insurance courses, stuff about paying for your kids, college, and getting scholarships for your kids, just a whole bunch of stuff. So those three are the primary operational platforms where people can reach me. And then separately on social media, we're pretty much everywhere. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, the whole nine. You can connect with me on social, and all of it is just either under The Money Coach or under my full name, Lynnette Khalfani-Cox.
Thank you so much, Money Coach Lynnette Khalfani-Cox. We appreciate you being with Project Green today. And I was soaking it all in. I'm sure everyone on the call did, and everybody who hears this, once we post it, they will be appreciative as well. So on behalf of all of them, thank you once again, and thank you all for joining us in the studio audience, and make it a great afternoon.
Thank you, Dallas, and the entire Project Green team. I'm appreciative of all of you.
Thank you.